Well, hello and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, HRs, recruiters, and an actor or two as we try to make the world of work just a little bit better. And Jeremy, you're back with us today. Great to see you. Happy 2026 to everyone. It's our first podcast of the year. And today, I think I'm going to find this really interesting. Once again, open mic, everyone jump in. But we're going to talk about career growth without people management, the current leadership pipeline challenge. Now, Jeremy, are you saying as we're going forward, we're going to abandon people management?
So that's actually it's I love how we don't plan ahead for this, but it falls into place. The question that you just asked is a question that I asked, and I was kind of slapped in the face with the answer. So I'll make sure to go over that. Actually, let me see if I can get to that. So one of the questions I asked, and this whole thing comes with these studies with millennials and Gen Y. I'm going to mess up. So millennials and Gen Y. No, Gen Z. Gen Y. Who's Gen Y?
Millennials are Gen Y. Gen X, Gen Y became the millennials, and then Gen Z to follow.
Right. So Y is the millennials. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So thank you. So millennials and then Gen Z. About not a lot of them not wanting to take leadership positions. So there was a Deloitte article that came out, and we were looking at that. And I'll get to that, Tom, because I have it highlighted. Because my question was basically, will we not need people management leadership positions because of AI and all these other things? But the takeaway is that no, we'll need it a lot more. So I put the references in the chat, and then this right now that I'm just going to touch on is Deloitte Global 2025 Gen Z and Millennial Survey, Growth of Pursuit of money, meaning, and well-being. And I'm going to start off with this. Anyone, as usual, just feel free to raise your hands, and then I'll cut in when I can to add more. But some of the takeaways. So it's interesting, right? No matter like the different studies, millennials are year this to year that, but then someone else says millennials is year this to year that. So it changes. So for the purpose of this study, Gen Z, born 1995, between 1995 and 2006, are projected to make up 74% of the global workforce by 2030. I mean, I'm assuming that's just normal and that's just how it happens, but that is absolutely nuts to me. So this survey, it's in its 14th year and examines factors shaping the worldview of over 23,000 Gen Z and millennial respondents over 44 countries. So it's kind of thorough. So just because they don't, or the Gen Zs aren't looking to fill leadership positions, it doesn't mean they're ambitious. And here it kind of puts in a group Gen Z and millennials. Success, though, isn't about climbing the corporate ladder. They're not motivated by reaching senior leadership positions, and we'll get into why. So making money is important, but finding meaningful work and well-being is more important. And this is something that started later on, like in the later part of the millennials and then Gen Z. So only 6% of Gen Zs in the study say their primary goal is to reach a leadership position. I remember growing up, where everyone was saying, "I want to be this like everyone. I want to be in a leadership position. I want to own the company. I want to be president." But this doesn't mean they lack ambition. Like I said before, learning and development is one of the top three. So they are really, I want to learn. I want to learn every day at work. And that's right behind work-life balance and then opportunities to progress in their careers. 70% of Gen Z say they are developing skills, good, to advance their careers once a week or more. And then 59% of millennials are saying the same, which is, I think that's positive. That's really good. They also think Gen Z and millennials also say that the development of soft skills like empathy, in leadership and empathy, communication, those are very important as well. Because we've all heard, no matter what generation you are at, we always hear bad things about the generation below us. There's another study, Tom, that I looked at that said when you look at it and break it down statistically, The differences aren't that different between the silent generation, boomers, Gen X, and all the other ones. They're really not that different. It's just how we go about expressing those particular values. So I think
Right.
that's pretty important as well. Um, what else
Well,
was I?
I would love to jump in there for a second
Yeah,
because
please.
I had my own millennial chats over the holidays, and it's not just that they're not thinking of leadership positions; they're not planning to have a home, like a house. They're not, they don't think buying a home is in their life. They're not looking for having kids because why would they want to raise kids in a world that is going in the wrong direction? So I'm not surprised to hear that they're not interested in leadership because a lot of them don't think the world's going to be around by the time they get there. And why work hard to achieve something you might not be able to grasp? And they don't like the way we've done things. And I can't blame them.
Well, that's interesting. On the other side of the spectrum, an answer to that is have kids, teach them right, in that way that they can change the world. Another thing is instead of having, it's always like we always talk about having a better planet for our kids, but what about having a better kids for our planet? So we can change it by changing course by people having more kids because we know that that's on the decline as well. So there is a counter argument there. But yeah, it's everyone has a different view, and that's why we like to talk about these things and get these different perspectives.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. You got more, or should we go to Nick?
Let me see. I just want to add a couple things. Another thing mentioned in the actually, no, come back to me after Nick. I don't want to interrupt Nick's thought if he has one live.
Nick, you got a thought?
I've got several. Again, you've heard me rail against the generational labels because everybody wants a good and happy workplace. And I think to Jeremy's point, the values are all there. The expressions are very much different. And I always, I find the discussion fascinating because there's, all the pressures outside of it. Like millennials are, for all intents and purposes, the children boomers, and we saw, the corporate contract break down. It was no longer 40 years and a gold watch. Now you're a mercenary for hire. And why am I going to invest my time and skill for an organization that's going to drop me for the shareholder next year? It's very bitter. It's very understandable. But I mean, those sort of sociological changes have happened. You throw the rapid advance of technology and everybody chasing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. We've got to be faster and more efficient and more efficient. And it's tilted the table in a very strange way. I just finished reading an economics book that was When More is Not Better, basically saying the way we've put our economic and political system, it's no longer the bell curve. It's turned to more of the Pareto principle. And that result is going to keep generating that more of that result. And so it keeps shifting faster and further because that's the way we've set up the system. Then he is optimistic, and there are several things that are working in other arenas that could come into, economics and politics to sure that up. And I'll see if I can find the title and author and throw that in the chat. But it was an interesting sort of kind of long view. You see the cascading effects of a focus on education, and everybody said, okay, university is the key, and it's a copycat league. So that was supposed to be the golden ticket to success. And there's a glut of people with degrees, masters, doctorates that aren't the same way. And so you've got to adjust and shift, but the shift doesn't happen all at once. It's going to take, this sector of the population and that sector of the population. And, the other confounding factor, millennials are not teenagers anymore. Let me raise my hand as an older millennial. I'm in my 40s. We're not, the punk kids just trying to navigate the workforce anymore. But also, previous generations, due to increases in health and efficiency, were able to stay in the workforce longer, and in some cases had to stay in the workforce longer. So those natural leadership cycles are disrupted, and they haven't found a new set of equilibrium. And so there are still, people are working longer, which is a great thing, but there's no room at the inn, so to speak. And so if there's a population decline, at some point there's going to be a click, and maybe it's Gen Z, Gen Alpha, but there will be kind of a seismic shift. But in the meantime, it'll be some of these smaller shifts and things like that as you see people age out. But you start practicing like you were taught. And if you were taught a particular model, it's going to take several iterations for that to change to where we may want it.
Thank you very much for that. Jeremy, should we come back to you or go to LindaAnn? We're back to you.
Yeah. So the one of the concepts that we'll be talking about is reluctance to lead, and what Nick was saying in terms of different things taking time. Both managers and the respondents in this study felt like managers are missing the mark. So the millennials and the Gen Z think that mostly what the managers are doing versus what they should actually do is what they're doing is closely overseeing day-to-day tasks. It's primarily what managers are doing now. And we've had tons and tons of conversations on this about when you're a leader, you focus on the person, not the task, and let the person do the task, and you do that people leadership. But regardless, here's what they said managers should actually be doing and leaders should be doing is providing guidance and support to team members, inspire and motivate the team, setting boundaries and ensuring work-life balance, and teaching and mentor employees. Now, this is, gold to people in HR and IO psychs because this is what all the literature says. Like this is important in terms of leadership positions. So what I want to give some takeaways here with, all right, what can organizations actually do? And some of the things that the result of this Deloitte article was top ways in which employers can support Gen Z and millennial learning needs, offer financial compensation for learning opportunities, not just educational credits, one-to-one mentorship opportunities. I see those more and more in the workplace, and that's good. Dedicated in-house learning programs and actually giving employees like on the clock time so that they can focus on them. Different learning platforms, edX, Udemy, all these other things, and also subscriptions to them so that they can kind of self-teach because that's what they've done, really. I mean, how many people learn to do something through watching a YouTube video, and all of a sudden you're learning more and more and more. I got interested in how I was the other day I heard something about I was reading something about millstones and how olive oil is made. So I got really interested. So here I am about an hour later looking at these YouTube videos on all the millstones and how they have really stayed the same throughout the centuries. And I watched this video about how like George Washington's millstone is still working and how to cut the stone. But we've started to learn how to do that. So these learning platforms, being able to self-teach, employers can realize, hey, my employees can do this. And also another thing was peer learning and knowledge sharing. We're going to, I think it's the last week in January, we're going to talk about how leaders, coaches, and mentors can actually do some, increase their mentoring ability for leaders. And I think next week, and we'll talk a little bit about it today, we're going to talk more about that reluctance to lead because there is a sweet spot where someone might be not totally against leadership, but they might be this high potential. And we're going to talk all about how I think it's something like 60 or 70% of HR initiatives miss the mark when even identifying high potential individuals. And then once they do, they totally miss the mark on helping them become interested in leadership at all. So there's a way to kind of have a net to catch these. But just want to share this. Tom, back to you.
Thank you very much. LindaAnn, let's go over to you.
Hi, it's good to see everybody again. I haven't seen you all in a while. I think that for me, one of the things I've noticed is that in general, well, and millennials and Gen Zs, so, and there's cusp people in there, and that depends on who they were raised by, is how they really identify. But what I see is there isn't the same amount of desire to be that lifelong learner where that's self-motivated, right? Where they're reading the books outside of work, where they're doing the work outside to move themselves in the direction that they want. It's fine to have education and all those opportunities at work, to do it on work time. I've seen situations where there's opportunities and they don't take advantage of them, whether they're just live meetings and be working meetings, or there's a library, or we'll pay for this certification, just go do it. And it's not being taken advantage of. Whereas, I think that my experience and part of it's very, very tainted by my perspective, but I don't see that same motivation to do something independently versus what the company is directing for your learning. And so I think that's one difference. I think one of the other reasons that they might not want to take on leadership opportunities is they don't feel prepared and the role models haven't been good. So why would I want to put myself in that position to be perceived that way and to have this negative experience? So I don't think that what they anticipate that role being is beneficial to them.
Well, let me ask you this because, I'm one of those cusp people. I'm at the end of the boomers, and I think all the boomers should be told that it's time for us to all retire and go away. But I grew up in a world where I felt I could change the world. I don't think millennials feel like they can change anything today.
I agree. I mean, their life as adult, especially Gen Zs, their life as adult has been one crisis after the other, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and the other thing about leadership is there may be, especially for millennials, is how many of them had parents who did the corporate ladder, who worked the nights, who did all those kinds of things, and then said, man, I regret not spending more time with my family. They see the other side of it and say, I don't want to do that. So where's the balance for them, and where's the role model on how to make the progression of leadership or success or whatever they see that to be, and it's not defined the same way as it was a while ago. But pardon me. How do I do that career success advancement, whatever that is to you, and still make sure you're there for all the soccer games or the things that you're going to look back and say on your deathbed, say, damn, I wish I'd done that.
Can I just so I'm going to offer, because I've been, with all the looking into this, I'm going to offer a different perspective. I don't know if I adopt it yet, but I'm going to offer the play devil's advocate. Could it not be that everyone has it so easy today that now people are kind of nitpicking a little bit? If you look back into history of every generation, we have it so easy in the workplace, if you think about it. If you look at, in LindaAnn, your comment of one crisis after another, if you look at the crisis of each generation that they went through, I think ours are pretty light, if you really think about it. I mean, look at the world wars, you look at all these different things, you look at, I mean, you even go back, I mean, you want to go back, far into like the 1700s, but even just in the past 125 years, I think it's gone increasingly easier. Life has gotten increasingly easier. So there is a part of me that thinks we just have it so easy today that we have the benefit, thank goodness, to focus on things like meaningful work. I mean, how many people 100 years ago could focus on meaningful work? So I'm just going to offer that different perspective.
I think that's really valid. So it depends on what you mean by easier, right? Yeah, we have cars, we can go to the gas station, we can take a hot shower whenever we want. We aren't dealing with, rationing of food or any of those kinds of things, right? But how they see I don't know, I think it's a more psychological and emotional level rather than physical need that they're seeing.
I kind of feel like I'm standing in front of the candy store looking at the window at all the treats, but the door's locked. And I think a lot of people maybe feel a little bit like that. I'm also starting to think that maybe we need IO psychology for the real world. Forget about business. We just need IO psychology in our life. Thank you very much. Natasha, let's go to you.
Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon and Happy New Year. This is a very interesting and timely conversation. And as a millennial, my take might be a little bit different. I mean, while we were off camera, we kind of talked about like the traumas of the meme that I've seen circle around social media saying millennials have the world has never been the same for millennials ever since we sang "We Are the World." Because, you know, our entire existence has been really the focal point of three major traumatic events: 9/11, then the economic downfall in 2008, 2009, at the height of President Obama's presidency. And then again, we have COVID, which was another focal point that really kind of like impacted how a lot of us have navigated or have been able to navigate the workforce. Because by that time, a lot of millennials are like in their mid 30s, late 40s, and the age that traditionally, and looking back at the generations before us, are the age groups in which people would be stepping into these leadership and these managerial roles and be set in stone in their careers. And as a result of COVID, well, first we entered into a workforce that was barely a workforce in 2008, 2009, or if we were already in the workforce, we were impacted by the economic and work environment at that time. And then COVID brought in a different layer where layoffs had been happening, and happening at a level where we have never seen before, and it has not gotten any better. I think that for a lot of millennials and Gen Zs, we come into the workforce hopeful, ready to make the difference, and we get crushed in the process. We do all the things that we know we are to do. We get the college degrees. We work hard, we take initiatives, we volunteer for special projects with the hopes of standing out, being noticed, and being able to go up the workforce ladder as we have always been taught. Work hard, do the work, show up, and you will be promoted, you will be rewarded. Except that now we're seeing that the harder that you work is the more work that is assigned to you and not necessarily any tangible rewards attached to it. And many times, most than ever, you now see the politics of the people who do less are the ones who get promoted faster, or likability, relationship, and so much more. And so we now learn to rewire how we approach the workforce. And LindaAnn, I think a little bit different, and I have experienced a little bit different, where we say that the millennials are not motivated to do the work outside of what is offered at work, outside of the learning and development at work, or outside of, picking up a book and learning how to increase yourself. I feel like a lot of people in my generation are doing just that. But because they're not rewarded and that their talent is being used, they now show up differently, that I am not going to provide all of these elevated skill sets and be met with the bare basic, the bare minimum. And on the other hand, a lot of people have been using that to build their different careers outside of the workplace, and that I become a consultant. I start my own business outside of the workplace, and I am going to give the workplace exactly what it hired me for, and use my workplace, my day to day, as my sponsor. This is what pays my bills. This is what gives me health insurance, as I'm on the outside trying to build something for myself and creating additional income, and in the process, generational wealth. Because we are now at a point where we realize that we cannot really count on corporate America. And that is corporate America's fault, regardless of the industry. We had the CEO of the president of SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resources Management, write a book and dropped it right at the height of COVID. And the title of the book, while everybody is losing their jobs, is Fire Half Your Workforce. 2025, SHRM has been hit with an $11.5 million verdict for discrimination, abuse, and the list goes on by an employee within their organization. This was a court verdict. And the stories that people have of how they've been taken advantage of in the workforce, a lot of millennials and Gen Z says, if this is what leadership means, I do not want to be a leader. Because oftentimes the very work that we do to be different than our managers, be different than the people before us, or to offer a different perspective that is beneficial to the organization from a standpoint of business growth. But for organizations, they see it as additional work and people stuff that we do not want to commit to. And as a result, we're now training a new generation to show up differently in the workforce. And I think the last thing that I would like to say is that when we think about managers, a lot of managers that are in current managerial positions were not necessarily trained and are learning through trial and error. And sadly, the errors that they make are the ones that stick the most and trigger people in the workforce to say that might not be worth it, or getting that promotion to be a manager of a team that is unmanageable because too many people for me to manage and do my day to day. And salary wise, it's not worth it. Or if it is worth it salary wise, the benefits come at the disadvantage of everything that we stand for. It comes at a cost to our mental health, our physical health, our relationship with family, the ability to make it home on time, to be able to kiss my child, to go to good night, go to sleep, or at the cost of not being able to go to the soccer games, the basketball games after school. And I think that in order for us to reach, I think that oftentimes we place unfair labels on millennials and Gen Z and do less time analyzing and taking accountability for the environment that we have created for them. Because the world as we know it today did not get here as a result of them. It's the world that we inherited and the world that we want to change. However, the people in that world do not allow for that change to take place.
Thank you very much for that, Natasha. Well said. Lee, let's go to you.
Okay. Buckle up, Tom. So, all right. A lot to unpack. So, let me just start off saying I absolutely abhor the generational discussion because I don't like putting people in buckets. Stereotypes, I mean, we've had that talk before, and I feel terrible. I can never remember the lady's name that did the talk. The whole thing about stereotypes. Not that they're wrong, they're incomplete. The human brain categorizes. It's a shortcut. We do that. We put people in buckets because it's our way of explaining the world. But we have to understand that we're taking shortcuts. Millennial. What does that mean? Oh, it means you were born between this time and this time. Oh, horse hockey. If you want to look at the state of the world, look in the mirror. We are the ones that created the world that we live in. And if you want to worry about the world that we grew up in, look at our parents. And if the parents want to complain about us, they should look in the mirror. Every generation complains about their children. Well, guess what? Guess who raised them? Every generation wants to complain about their parents. Hello. It's just, it repeat ad nauseum. Here's the thing, okay? So we have this cognitive dissonance going on, and it's kind of fascinating and frightening at the same time. So you're absolutely right. We have a lot of the younger generations who are not wanting to step into leadership roles because they have this cognitive dissonance going on. Because you have this, I want to change the world. We need to make it better for everybody. We've got this, this whole kind of a collectivist thing going on at the same time that they are strongly embracing an individualistic mindset. And the two things are at war with each other, because what are we talking about? Oh, this, what we, quiet quitting and all these things we're talking about, and and let me just caveat, I firmly support setting boundaries, and all those things at work, psychological safety. Let me just say that to start. But what happens is we're saying, do your job and nothing else. Set your boundaries. When the day ends, leave. We're saying all these things, and I'm doing just what my role is, and I'm going home. Well, that's very individualistic. That is a very individualistic mind thing. And so when you're talking about we're setting these boundaries, we're putting ourselves in this box, and we're saying that this is my swim lane. This is where I am. This is what I'm doing, and this is where I'm staying. Well, guess what's not there? What's not there is I'm not stepping out of this to go do some continuing education on my time after work. And if I am, to Natasha's point, I'm doing it for my side hustle. I'm not doing it for the job that's paying my bills. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. I'm not criticizing that at all. You have to make that decision. But that is totally different from what previous generations have chosen to do. And that was the paradigm at the time. That doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. It just makes the reality at the time. At the time, that was the way our world was working. That was what you did. Think about, the generation coming out of the World War and everything, largely uneducated past high school, if they even made it that far. A lot of skilled trades, a lot of blue collar, a lot of agriculture. We're coming into the Industrial Revolution. We're still going through a lot of that. Coming out of the war, a lot of these people are skilled trades that they learned in the military. A lot of women in the workforce who hadn't been there before. We had a whole shifting of the whole world. My dad, he was raised by a master sergeant, 7 kids, mother didn't work. He told me, he said, we were poor, but we didn't know it. It was an attitude thing. Told me about eating government cheese, the big block, cut it up. Single wrap cheese, man, that's for rich people. It's an attitude. My dad growing up would not understand looking in my refrigerator and getting out a bag full of shredded cheese that somebody shredded already. And it's a total difference in mindset. And so we move through that and we go into this, okay, now everybody, American dream, we got to get an education. And so then, my parents' generation, we're moving into the college education. We're getting away. Oh, you don't want to be blue collar. You don't want to work in the trades. You want to get a college education. So we're moving through that, and we're making education affordable. We're available. We're giving out school loans and Pell Grants and all these things. And okay, that's great, wonderful. Well, now we're seeing that now. We're seeing the results of that. What are we lacking? We don't have enough plumbers. We don't have enough pipe fitters. Well, good paying jobs that don't have 6 figures of debt. And we're getting people who are walking out of college with a degree in 18th century literature who can't find a job. Because what did we tell them? You just need an education. Doesn't matter what the piece of paper says. You just need an education. You just need a degree and you can get a job. That's all you have to have. You just need to, those rubes who want to do a trade, I don't care about those. We just need, that's the help. We don't care about that. And so we changed the mindset and we move forward. And so how are we going to fix this? Well, we probably can't. Our time is, we're moving on past our time. We are moving on towards that. Natasha, Nick, those people who are behind us, my children, LindaAnn's children, Tom's children, it's moving into their world. Is it a scary place? And you go, yeah. But you think about where we are. Are things easier? Yes. We talk about how poor we are. Think about the fact in the United States, the poor have internet, iPhones, most of them have cars. The poor in this country have more than many of the wealthy in other countries in the world. But we don't think about it like that. We think about how poor they are. It's a mindset thing. We don't understand. We don't understand how entitled that we are and how fortunate that we are and what we have to work with. We need to reframe. And I'm as guilty as anyone else. We need to reframe. And we need to work with those people. I mean, I do this, I try to work with the people that I lead at work to understand that they are the master of their destiny. Because I think it was Natasha that said it about not training the people to be leaders. We're not. I've said it before. We promote people to the highest level of their incompetence. Everybody took a step back. The one who didn't get that memo, that's the new manager. We don't train them. We just put them in the spot. And all the other people are going, whoop, it's 4:00, gotta go. And that's what we've done. And they see what we've done and they don't want to step up. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. And it's up to us who have ended up in that position because we wanted it or because we draw the short straw. It is up to us to do better.
Thank you very much for that, Lee. Jeremy, let's go back to you first, and then Nick will go back to you. Jeremy, we can't hear you.
I double tapped my audio, Tom, so I'm unmuted and then muted back. But here we go. I wanted to go back to that leadership question that you asked. In the beginning, you said, does that mean that I guess the kind of leadership position, since we're not getting these leaders in, that there's going to be something changing and that we won't need it? And how I asked the same question. There's another article. It's a really good one. It's called "Reluctant to Lead: Conceptualization and Contextualization." Big words. And that was done in 2024. So it's good to have this recent study. And I found that there was another study that was done in 2015 that really echoed this. So there's some cross validity to it. But if you look at it, leadership positions aren't going to have to go away. It's basically when you look at, there's a trend now that organizations are going for more flat instead of like this traditional laddered hierarchy, that organizational structures are trying to be more agile, which means having more flat structured. But that even if we went that way, it doesn't mean that leadership's going to diminish. It's more or less you're still going to have these people to manage. And the diversity of these work teams in terms of background, culture, values, work styles, expectations, there's going to need to be even more active leadership than we have today to create these shared norms, keep understandings away, and basically just keep collaboration productive. And it made me think also about I can't remember who was saying it, about, I think it was that conversation that LindaAnn and I were having. When you look at what Gen Z and millennials are wanting out of the workforce in terms of the leadership, in terms of the culture of the organization, doing fulfilling work, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I think there are more IO psychology jobs now, and IO psychology is finally starting to get its brand after it only took 100 years. Because those are the kinds of things that when you point to effective organizations, the learning and development, the mentorship, the cross training, identifying high potential leaders, nurturing high potential leaders, work-life balance, all these different things. That's what the data have been saying forever. And now, is it by happenstance? Is it because maybe we can focus on these things. It makes me think back, Tom, I've mentioned this before. I remember this BMW commercial where they had like heated cup holders and all these things that are definitely not needed in a car, but they said if we can focus on these things, you can bet your butt that we've really solidified the engine and all these other components. So I'm wondering if we're finally able to look at what people, employees, workers see as the heated cup holders, the heated seats, the heated steering wheels, because the fundamentals, we've gotten over them and the fundamentals of business are strong. And maybe the workplace isn't as bad as we think, but now we're finally noticing all the stuff that's going on with toxic leadership, managers who are micromanagers, not being able to identify the correct high potential leaders, promoting somebody who's good at a task, not because they're good at, people skills and leadership. These different things. We're finally able to focus on that, but it seems like it's a sweet spot. Here's what IO psychologists think are important. There's an enormous parallel to what Gen Z and what millennials think are important, or I shouldn't even say think are important, what studies show are important. And all of a sudden, is it a coincidence that IO is finally getting a little footing and we see tons and tons of IO jobs? I don't think it's that much of a coincidence. But got off track a little bit, Tom. Back to what we were saying about why leadership will continue to be needed, even when we get more, AI, you get more automated work, even if things get less hierarchical, structured, people are still going to need the direction. AI, maybe in 100, 200 years, AI is not going to be able to provide that. Alignment, conflict management, helping with decision making, all the mentoring. And when you look now at leadership, this study, this reluctance to lead study, there are enormous failure rates. I think it's like 60% of I forget exactly how they termed it, but I'll just say people promoted into leadership positions fail miserably, just in terms of their job and being leaders. So now we've got this emergent theme because we're able to focus on those, those heated cup holders. It makes me wonder, once we get that stuff ironed out, what are going to be the heated cup holders of the workplace in 40 years or in 100 years. But again, we're going back to the importance. If the talent pool is narrowing because people aren't opting in, if 76% of the workforce by 2030, only 6% of them are saying they want to be in a leadership position, that's a huge gap. And that's a very narrow talent pool. So the question then becomes, and then we'll talk about this, of course, still in this episode and next time as well, but how do you start to identify these high potential leaders and get them to, kind of like as Lee was saying, different perspective, take a different perspective. Maybe now that they're in that position, they can make a difference. They can start to make the workplace the way many people think it should be. Tom?
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, again, we can only come to this conversation from the perspective that we come to. And so, again, if we stop and listen, we can all try and move the ship together. I'm not saying we need to put, boomers and Gen X out to pasture just yet. There's a lot that can be taught if we would just listen. And I know millennials, we can give the litany of bad timing that's happened, but that's with any generation. There are events that you will know where you were, when JFK was shot, when 9/11 happened, all of these sort of very tragic, desperately sad things. They're going to hit you differently based on where you were developmentally at that point. And I think that's kind of more of the unifying cohort of a generation than, just we're going to set these arbitrary dates. It's, where were you, what seat were you in to view the world when these things went right or wrong? To try and hopefully, bring a little bit of optimism back to the conversation. I think that, you have a whole study of what is leadership, what is a leader, what are the good qualities, and we've come up with so many different models. Servant leadership, leadership from within, and we've seen the flattening of organizations. So I would almost push back a little bit and say, are these cohorts, millennials and Gen Z, are they not wanting to be leaders, or do they not want to see? Do they see leadership in the same way as people that came before them? Because you have so many topics about, managing up and leading without a title. And so I think there's a tension in they see what the value and the burden of leadership becomes, and they may shy away from that. But also they may see, I'm leading every day by just, sitting on my corner of the world and then doing what I can for my family and the sphere of influence that I have. And so will leadership ultimately look different? Because in a vacuum, somebody's going to step up and step in. Like, somebody's going to have to lead, good, bad, or otherwise. And what are those values and things like that they're going to project from the top? And so hopefully, we've got people who have been said, you are special. You are an individual. Self-esteem was very, very big and has had societal impact as how people think. It's shifted more towards that individualistic sort of thing. And now I think there is some pendulum swing, am I better off, reading on my Kindle or holding a book? Am I better taking notes on my tablet or getting a piece of paper? And so we're seeing some of these things where processes and kind of those classic ideas, the biology, the physiology, can shape our thinking. And so there's probably a solution in looking back at something that may not have been, finished at some point. But I think there's two ways to approach it. I think you can drag them into leadership. You can say, I see you as a leader. And when somebody starts to believe in you, you do start to believe in yourself. So I think those sort of votes of confidence and things like that could go a long way to ease some of this apprehension. But priorities are different, and everybody is describing value in their own way. And we haven't been curious enough to find that common language. And we're looking at general broad trends, and it can look that way on a societal level, at a company level, at a family level, and it's going to look different through each of those lenses. They interact, and I'm hopeful that, we'll get a common language, and, the future is bright if we can, just hold tight.
Thank you very much, Nick. Natasha, back to you.
Thank you. So I think for a second, I think that we have been really using the titles manager and leaders interchangeably.
Yeah.
And they're two different things. A leader's role is the one that focuses on motivation. How do I support you? How do I get you there? And all the things. And the manager's role is just making sure that the work is done, making sure that we are meeting business objectives, meeting and surpassing business objectives, and less on the people side, but more on the ROIs, right? More on the process and everything else. And I say this to say that millennials and Gen Z are not shying away from leadership roles. They're shying away from being managers, because the cost of being a manager far outweighs the rewards. And I feel as though when we think about it, this is why, again, and to the next point of bringing it back to, where does IO come into place, right? And we come into place because we are the ones who are helping organizations understand that you can't forget the people. You can't forget the psychology of what motivates the people, what encourages the people. How do we meet the needs of the people so that as we meet the needs of the people meet the needs, meet the business objectives, right? How do we get them from A to B from a place that says, and we're investing in you, and we expect to see that ROI? I think that managers don't do a great job at motivating and supporting employees, and organizations don't do a great job at supporting these managers in doing so. Organizations say, these are the goals, this is where we want to be. Managers go down and say, this is what needs to be done, and y'all make it happen. And then, I mean, and traditionally we would think, oh, those are the jobs and roles of HR. But now we're seeing HR is more expected to be a strategic force that develops and helps managers get the work done, bring the people in, organizational design, everything else, and paper pushing. And there is this trend that I've been seeing with a lot of organizations really focusing on, oh, our people are burned out. Let's bring someone in to talk about resilience. And the word resilience has become so cliche in the workforce that employees are now realizing that resilience is a way that we train employees to say, and you just got to put up with it.
Yes, I agree.
And we just got to put up with it. So I don't believe that people are choosing not to be leaders. I see employees be leaders in terms of sometimes leading their managers, managing up, leading by way of saying to someone, hey, you messed up. Let me show you where you messed up. It's kind of a we look out for each other. But at the same time, it doesn't happen in every workplace. And so I think that it's best to say for us to be cognizant in how we use the two titles. And again, going back to saying, if organizations don't know how to motivate, how to support their employees, and being able to step into these roles so that we have the right people in these roles, because when the right people shy away from these roles, we have the people who are perpetrating the harm in organizations. And so if we can't do this on our own, who do we turn to? And the essence of it all is in how IO steps up, not to save the day, but to help these organizations understand how to get there.
Thank you very much for that. LindaAnn, let's go to you. And just to give you a heads up, we're running out of time.
I wanted to first, I agree with Natasha, about the different roles of leadership and managers. I think that one of the key aspects of managers, one of the things, key ways that they can serve the organization well is to really understand their intermediary role. It's a very difficult role because you are, you're answering to the leadership and then you're also answering to the front lines. And so you're the filling in the sandwich kind of thing. And you can get squished. But if the leadership is clearly communicating the strategy and goals of where the organization wants to go, part of the management's job is to take that information and to help bridge the gap between the needs of the workers, especially Gen Zs and millennials, who want to see that what they do at their desk every day, wherever that desk may be, is contributing to something greater than themselves. They want to understand how doing X is going to get the company to Y. And so part of that integration and understanding is the manager's job is to understand that these three tasks are going to get us to this milestone, and that's how it's contributing to the greater good or whatever. And that's what makes your work purposeful. Right. But you have had to buy into the purpose of the organization to begin with. Right. So that's critical. But they're the kind of they're that intermediary that helps it make sense. Right. That bridges the gap between what I do every day and where the company wants to get to.
Okay. I'm going to hold back a little bit until we talk to Jeremy.
So going back to that managing versus leader, and that's how we've always, like how Natasha was saying, and that's how we've always viewed it, probably because that's how it is. But when you look at, so if a manager, I don't know if there's a question here. Maybe the question is, maybe it's time now where managers start to be the people that we actually refer to as leaders. I think it gets kind of wishy-washy. Like when we talk about leaders, are we talking about leaders of a company? Are we talking about leaders of a team? When we do 360s for organizations, we give in the manager 360, there's a question like to tell us about the types of leadership qualities this person possesses. And they some of them are outstanding, right? So that's the managers. If managers aren't being leaders, let's say someone manages a team of 7. If they're not leaders, does that mean that those 7 people have zero leadership in the company? Because that manager's boss isn't leading them. That manager's boss's boss isn't going to be mentoring and doing these things. So maybe it's been this thing, and maybe that's kind of the hump that everyone's trying to get over, is managers getting out of that role that we viewed them in for so long of not having those qualities. And when you look back at that Deloitte report, that's exactly what the millennials and the Gen Z are saying. Managers right now are closely overseeing day-to-day tasks. Well, that's the manager's job, is what we've been grown to think. But what they want is provide guidance, support to team members, inspire, motivate, teach and mentor, set boundaries, and ensure work-life balance. Those aren't things that managers typically we think of as we've talked about it over the years. Those are leadership qualities. So I think basically what is being said is all the managers out there be leaders instead of managers. And they're still gonna be called managers, but maybe it's up to us at some kind of ground level here where we recognize this and start saying the job of a manager is to lead their team, even though they don't have that particular title.
Well, you can say a job of a manager is to lead, but what exactly does leadership mean, or what is it going to mean? LindaAnn talked about the messaging from leadership, but I'm old enough that I remember when businesses used to talk about being profitable. And about 10 years ago, that messaging changed to we need to maximize profitability. And when you start to look at it through that lens, you need to cut the fluff. And making my employees feel good, most corporate leaders, I would suggest, think that's fluff, that it's all about maximizing that profitability. Now, as IO psychologists, you can talk about how that actually might not work. But I'm also sort of wondering, we're very America centric in our discussions, mostly because most of the people are Americans, and we all follow the American example post World War II. But I'm sometimes wondering, is there value in talking to IO psychologists in Europe or in Asia who may have a different perspective? I know, Tim, you could probably add something to this because you have worked internationally. Do you want to jump in?
No, that'd be like a whole other discussion. I've got that homework assignment you gave me the last time I saw you. I was prepared to have that discussion. In the meantime, I'm sorry I've lost my voice. Maybe table it for next week. But yes.
There you go. I'm feeling good. Thanks for your leadership, Tim. Jeremy, let's go back to you. I'd love to hear your response.
Yeah, I know. So final thought. So remind me of that question, but final thought in terms of the manager thing. Natasha had mentioned that managers do have leadership qualities, but they're just underdeveloped, and it's so true. So it's like step one, you have managers that exist, develop them into leaders that their subordinates want them to be. And the majority of the subordinates are going to be, as we saw in the data, Gen Z and millennial. So, and then the next thing is identify high potential Gen Z and millennial leaders and nurture and develop them. And that's an easy enough formula, I think, that anyone could get on. Back to your question about international, I would say yes. Depending on the country, though, some countries deal more with work, like more into the clinical side, where it's like mental health and well-being, which IO psychology in the US cannot and should not touch. We're not therapists and counselors, but there are, I forget, I knew this really well about 6 months ago, but now I forget. There are countries where they focus actually on the clinical side and like the counseling aspect in the workplace, but it's just different with licensure and that. So I would say, yeah, it's always, have discussions about people in with IOs in other countries, but always be aware of that because some people don't even realize that and recognize it. And then there's this disconnect and yada, 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 as Seinfeld and George say.
But I have noticed that companies and businesses outside the United States do seem more open to the message of IO psychology. Well, we'll talk about that some point later. Thank you very much, everyone. Great conversation. I think we're going to open some cans of worms here, which I think will be absolutely great. Jeremy, once again, thank you for your leadership. Where are we going next week?
Next week, how to identify high potential reluctant leaders that are in the persuadable zone. And then after that, how supervisors, mentors, and coaches can develop Gen Z and millennial leaders. And to the point that many people made here today, focus on the individual, not the generation, because that's where it's at.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you, everyone, for your contribution today. And once again, you can join us live here at 12 Eastern. Just go to the CBOC website, get your free ticket, and share your voice. So once again, thanks, everyone. And Jeremy, if you want to count us out, we'll see everyone back here in 1 week's time.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone. Counting out in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.